Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to focus in on something I briefly touched on earlier this week. That Brexit means that Britain has some critical shortages of certain types of food, but it doesn't end there because we're also destroying those types of food, just throwing them away, even though we have a demand for them much higher than the available supply. And that isn't even where it finishes being crazy, because we have these shortages. We're destroying the produce that we make ourselves. But because we have these shortages, we're actually importing more of these foods from the EU. This is the Brexit perversion. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, attacking the impacts of Brexit is fairly easy pickings these days. You know, we've just heard that Intel will no longer be building their new chip factory in the UK. They weren't guaranteed to before, but they were considering it. Now they will not consider it because of Brexit. They want to be in the EU. You know, that's what they said. And this was after Tesla had already said much the same thing some time ago as well. More inward investment poured down the drain because of Brexit. A lot of money, lots of jobs, gone. But most of the public will just brush that off. You know, that's a story you might read and you go, oh, that's a bit of a shame. They are emotionally connected to these jobs that will never be, even if they could have been. And it wasn't necessarily going to affect them anyway. You know, you don't miss what you never had. So the challenge with discussing Brexit these days is really in which impacts, how do you get across to people that not only do we need to change things that we can, what do you focus on? Because before we can get anywhere on the argument of how we can deal with the mess, we need to persuade the right people that the damage is hitting home for them. It is affecting them. It's not just this thing that's affecting some people that's not them. And by the right people, what I mean is those who can make the difference at the next election. The only people with any power here. You know, whatever the Conservatives want to do about Brexit right now, they can do. Demonstrations of public anger are useful only in slowing down the damage, because it puts pressure on Conservative MPs to make them think you may lose your seats by doing this. That's all. You know, they have all of the power. Nothing will stop it until the government are no longer the government. Changing the Conservative leader will also only have a retarding effect on Brexit as well, at best. Every single one of the Conservative MPs in Parliament nailed their colours to the mast during the 2019 general election. All of them. There are those who understand how damaging Brexit is and didn't want the damage, but they were forced to publicly back the concept of a hard Brexit. Not just Brexit, a hard Brexit. There will be no reversal of this line while any of them is in Downing Street. Doesn't matter which one. So what will make an emotional connection? Well, we've seen it, really. Anything that people need for their daily lives on a large scale and are recognising shortages of. You know, we still have a shortage of blood test tubes as far as I can tell. Doctors are still being instructed not to order routine blood tests. Well, surely a major hit to our healthcare provision like that would elicit an emotional response. Well, not really, unfortunately. Because at any one time, only so many people are in need of healthcare in general. And of those who currently need it, only so many are being deprived. You know, we need something that hits millions of people all at once. You know, food, fuel, energy. You know, with food being something that, of course, everybody needs. I talk, the other ones, like energy price increases. Well, a lot of people can afford it. They may grumble about it. But at the end of the day, if you can afford it and you're not going to go into poverty because of the energy price increases, then you grumble rather than demand the government do better. But something like food, if you can't get the food you want, well, that is, even if you can afford, if it's just not there, you can't get it. I talked again this week about the tens of thousands of healthy pigs, it could be going up to 150,000, that are now being culled because we cannot get them to market. The farmers have bred and reared them, but there's a shortage of trained butchers, having lost much of our EU contingent with Brexit, much like many other skilled workers. This meant a backlog at abattoirs, and the government failed to address the issue when it was raised, and so now the pigs are having to be destroyed, as the industry warned 2 months ago. And this isn't overproduction. That would be tragic enough. There are gaps on our shelves of pork products. We're told that there will be no pigs in blanket or gammon joints this Christmas. In reality, there might be. Supermarkets are not going to take this lying down. They want to sell things. If they can't get these products from Britain, they will attempt to import them. That won't necessarily stop the shortages, of course. We still have a shortage of HGV drivers to actually distribute the food, even when we can get it into the country. We also have storage issues. But for supermarkets that have shelled out and they've got the drivers, they've got the workers, EU businesses may have the supplies. So we have this insane situation whereby we are destroying healthy pigs, which should be used for meat. And yet we have shortages of these pork products. As a result of these shortages, we are going to import from the EU. It is obscene on any level. And it doesn't stop with pork. We also had the same situation with poultry. Crops too. We've had fruit and veg rotting in the fields. Not enough workers to tend to the crops in some cases, and not enough to harvest them in many others. So the crops just rotted. Sometimes farmers invited members of the public to just help themselves, as giving it away is better than destroying it. But this isn't a sustainable model for farming. So farmers have already decided to plant less for next year. Beef is the latest. That was a bit of a surprise in some ways that beef would be affected. But in order to ensure supplies, British retailers are actually increasing the amount of Irish beef that they are importing. Again, largely a result of shortages in food processing in Britain. So it's not got quite the same level of problem that poultry and pork farming has, beef farming in Britain. But because of the shortage of workers at the food processing part of it, again, no such problems in the EU. So if we can physically transport the food, this is another example of how it's now just easier to import. Then we have this dumbass comment from the Conservatives' resident corpse, John Redwood. Time to end the import everything model. We need to buy more home-produced goods. We don't have enough home-produced goods. And what's more, what home-produced goods we did have are in serious decline, John. We're not importing more from the EU because we're choosing to, as such, because we have to. If people want turkey for Christmas, it's coming from the EU for a lot of people. Of course, there has been some British turkeys, but you won't be able to get it in December. If you can buy a turkey in December, it's not coming from this country. If people want pigs in blankets or gammon, again, if they're not buying it nice and early and whacking it in the freezer, it's coming from the EU. If people want to try and maintain supplies of fruit and veg, that's coming from the EU as well. We have a fundamental breakdown at the food production level in Britain. A fundamental breakdown. It has come as a direct result of the ending of freedom of movement in Britain. That one aspect of Brexit alone. These problems do not exist in any part of Europe where that freedom was maintained, including Northern Ireland. The focus in the media is very much on the critical shortage of HGV drivers, and this is certainly the most acute shortage. It feeds into everything else. For example, even milk is being poured down the drain now. A report on Sky News quoted a farmer saying that in 45 years he'd had to dump milk 2 or 3 times as a result of bad weather. Lorries not being able to get through and all that. He's now had to do it 4 times since August. It's not the weather stopping HGV drivers, it was summer. It's the fact that we don't have enough drivers. These critical shortages have the fingerprints of lack of HGV drivers all over them. But if there were suddenly enough drivers tomorrow, if somehow this visa scheme had actually worked, even though it had no chance of working because 5,000 isn't actually enough. It would have been very helpful, but it wasn't enough. Secondly, we can't actually attract a significant number of drivers from Europe, and ones from further afield would need to do tests to be able to drive on our roads. So that wasn't going to happen. But let's say it had. Let's say that problem had been solved. Some of these shortages would still persist. The dairy farms would be fine, as far as I can tell, because their issue is purely drivers. You'd probably be able to get petrol in the south of England as well, because again, that is an issue really with drivers. But we'd still have had those problems in the production of pork and poultry, as well as fruit and veg. We'd still have had the problems with processing food, because they're shorter. That's not just about distribution, that's workers in the factories as well, including beef products. You know, I had a comment on a video recently that said Britain was entering a cascading failure. Absolutely is. That's exactly what is happening. We've seen how even when a problem arises that isn't directly related to Brexit, Brexit consequences just make it way worse. You know, that's why there are some problems that are affecting other parts of Europe, but their consumers don't see it in the same way that ours do. The CO2 shortage evidence, not related to Brexit, but of the shortage of gas supplies. But the EU had the same problems, but not the same consequences. EU businesses could still buy CO2 that they needed, so could those in Northern Ireland, in fact. But in Britain, availability went to zero. Not just struggled, to zero. That's the difference. Other countries struggle and manage. We do without. Outside Britain, you may be aware of problems because you read reports about them. In Britain, you can see for yourself. And what happens with the next crisis? See, consider something. We're in autumn now. Winter will be coming. Only we don't have to worry about creepy people with blue eyes, but creepy people with blue rosettes. We have a shortage of HGV drivers. The government's petulant visa scheme yielded just over 100 drivers out of the 5,000 available visas. We're not getting the drivers we need, not even for Christmas, much less next year. We've already seen the effects of these shortages. Don't think they can get worse? You think this is it now? What's going to happen when the winter weather hits? What's going to happen when the roads are more treacherous and drivers have to go more slowly? You substantially increase the length of the journey. That's without even considering the increase in the number of incidents, lorry crashes. You know, with an already critically short number of drivers, and it's like you're removing even more drivers from the equation because each driver is now taking longer to do their run, which means there's a delay in being able to do the next run. So some runs will just not happen. And if the bad weather hits before Christmas, because it may not, we may get away with it up to Christmas, it may happen in January or February, but if it happens before Christmas, this will also coincide with an attempted increase in demand for distribution that we already can't manage at the current rate. What's that going to do? You know, no doubt another one that the government will later claim you could only have seen with hindsight. Oh yeah, hindsight's only 20/20 vision, isn't it? But that's something else that's coming for us, on top of everything else we have now. And it's not like sometimes you can sort of have some problems and you could see more problems on the horizon. You go, okay, well, we're going to deal with these problems now and then we'll deal with those problems later. But we're not dealing with the problems now. So it's all just piling up and piling up and piling up. And it is a cascading failure because when that winter weather arrives, it will compound the problems we have right now that we are not dealing with. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.